I am already having the time of my life just in the green room with our guest today. Cyndi Kurth is joining us, and she's going to talk to us about all sorts of things. But one thing she'll do is pull back the curtain on what's happening at the events that you're going to. If you're going to 3-day events, Cyndi has worn a lot of hats at these events, and a couple of them include the role of cross country control, include the role of announcer, and she's seen and heard a lot of things that we haven't heard if we're just, if our hat is just a helmet and we're a rider at these events. She can really give us some insight into the happenings behind the scenes. So, Cyndi, I know you have some amazing stories and some amazing experiences, and I'm just so excited to talk to you. So, thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you very much for asking me. It's appreciated.
Cyndi, how tell us how you got into eventing and then how you got into the roles that I just described. So how did you make the transition from rider to these other roles that you're filling?
Okay, so um, I grew up, of course, loving horses. And when I was in my late teens, there was an ad in the paper that somebody had opened a riding school. And I didn't have any money. So I showed up and asked if I could clean stalls. And it just so happened that the woman, the amazing woman riding, was an eventer. And so thank you, Kitty, for getting me into this all those years ago. And she had a clinic with Jim Graham, who at the time was just starting out in his own business. And he was looking at the time for his very first working student. And Kitty recommended me. And under no circumstances was I qualified for this job whatsoever. But I went up to be Jim's first working student, totally clueless, knew less than nothing. I mean, my first lesson, he said, "What leg's on the ground right now?" And I went, "Oh God." And but learned a tremendous amount, and then realized as a working student that you nearly starve to death. And I didn't have the ambition that I saw a lot of people who are now common names like David and Karen O'Connor, who back then were not common names. I didn't have that dedication. So came home, went back to school, worked a bunch of odd, weird jobs, went back into eventing, and was just eventing a horse. And um, at the time, I'd gotten hired at the police department, and I first was a 911 dispatcher, and then I went to rookie school on a dare, and so I became a police officer. And at the time, and this is all very random things. And then at the
Oh my
time,
gosh. Anyone
um,
listening, my jaw has dropped. I didn't know this part of the story. But being a dispatcher, you mentioned when we were talking earlier that you're kind of an adrenaline junkie.
yeah.
This is all this is all lining up.
So I at the time, just as it happened, the city of Daytona Beach was starting a mounted unit. And I really wasn't eligible because I had just got out of rookie school, but I was the only one that knew how to transport horses and how to do things. So in exchange, they sent me to mounted patrol school up in Mobile, Alabama. And so I was in charge of getting all of these horses up there and making sure that they did things. And I got to go to class. Well, this was Mardi Gras. And for those of you that don't know, Mardi Gras was the very first in Mobile in America before New Orleans. So they
Wow.
send you to school. You and your horse go to school in the daytime. And God, I sucked. Um, and so you're learning about tear gas, and you're learning about bombs, and you're learning about people throwing things at you. And then at night, you go out on the parades. And my poor event horse just learned to do all these things, and we were awful. I mean, he was afraid of the fire, and he was afraid. I mean, I was afraid of the fire. He was afraid of people with sticks coming to beat you up. I mean, we were terrible. But he liked the parade as long as he was out in front. So I did that, and actually won a gold medal at the National Police Olympics. Because I was so embarrassed at how badly I did that 9 months later I went back to the Olympics and we won a gold medal. So that was very exciting. Um, so you do things like jump over barricades, walk through fire, go under the the water from the fire trucks in the middle of the night with all the stuff as my poor event horse, God bless him. Um,
How
so,
cool. I didn't know the police Olympics was a thing, but
oh, it is.
that sounds really fun. All of
Everything you would
these
never do, you do.
Yes. Yes. That's a huge accomplishment though. That's actually very, very cool. And you took your event horse, like you were
Uh-huh.
able to bring your event horse as
Because
your mounted
this
patrol
right,
horse.
because the city only provided mounted patrol horses for those who actually were on the mounted patrol unit. And since I was the extra person, it was like, okay, guess what? We're going to learn how to do this. We're going to walk through fire, and we're going to get shot at, and we're going to do all these things.
And just when we all thought, jumping the ditch was
Oh yeah.
scary.
Yeah, well, what you do there is they have a pit, and you have to jump down into this pit, and it's filled with balloons, and you jump down into it, and they all pop, and your vet horse goes, "You are insane."
Oh my god. The thought when you said pop, my heart started racing. That
Yeah.
sounds terrifying. Um,
So,
okay.
so I moved my horse to a friend's barn, and the little kid came across the street one day, and she wanted to learn to ride, and I had taught years ago, and okay. So I'm on the police department, and I'm working the police department, and then this kid comes across the street. Well, then she brings a friend, and pretty soon, within the space of like 6 months, I have 30 kids that are riding with me, and I'm working my full-time police job, and I'm turning over 30 now, and I'm looking, I'm going, run after people in projects, and I'm not very fast, never. Teach little kids, work the midnight shift, teach little kids, because the
Yes.
income was starting to sort of go like this.
Mhm.
So finally, I stopped my job at the police department, went to teaching full time, and started volunteering at Rocking Horse Stables. Which I had invented since 1982. Um, so I'd show up with 13 kids and volunteer. And so if you rode with me, you had to come volunteer and do all the things. So one day I was sitting in scribing for Brian Ross, and the second announcer did not show up. And everybody was afraid to talk in the microphone for show jumping. And I went, how hard could this possibly be? So they found a scribe, and I went up there. And it just so happened that Jan Brodkin, who designs at Rocking Horse, and Gretchen Butts, international judge, were the people in the show jumping booth. And I got done, and they said, wow, you're sort of good. Would you like to do this? And I went, no. And Nico Meredith was the announcer at that time, and they told him, and he said, would you like to learn to do this? And I said, no. And I went back to my life. And I was volunteering the next time, and he asked again, and I went, no, I'm not interested. And by the third time, he said, look, there's this show coming up called Foxhall, and we need another announcer, and I think you'd be good at this. Why don't you come up and try this? And I talked it over with my husband, and he's like, it's a weekend. Why not? And I went up there, and I had a ball learning how to announce. And so I went up there, and I did this show, and I did not like the 8 hours of winding up wire afterwards, which I learned was a part of all of this. And Nico said, gee, would you like to work for me? And I said, yes, sir, on occasion. And he said, can you go to California? And 2 weeks later, I went to California. I had no business going. I was terrible. And I did my first event in California, and went, well, this is sort of fun. And 6 months later, I'm doing that balance again, and I'm going, kids are competing, and their parents are getting sort of cranky because one of them always wins. And I'm announcing, I'm going to all these interesting places, and people are really nice to me. And now I'm calling home because the barn help didn't show up. So it's 3 o'clock in the morning in California, and the barn help's not there. And my poor husband, who has a real job. And I went, okay. And my husband was like, sell the farm.
Oh
And
my gosh.
and so we did. And I started announcing, and then after a year and a half with Nico, I went out on my own. And that was in 2022 or 3. And here
Wow.
I am.
That is such a cool story. I love that you are open to the opportunities that life kind of presents you. That's your whole story is there's a lot of fate involved, but you have
Mhm.
to respond to these opportunities
Yep.
for it to take you to the next place that you're going to. And it's just very special to hear how, one thing could lead to another and land you somewhere that feels very right for you. We were talking earlier and you helped me distinguish between a commentator and an announcer.
Mhm.
And I will admit publicly now, I hadn't put it together. Obviously, having been at shows and having watched live streams, I know that these things are different, but tell us what an announcer is doing versus what a commentator is doing. And also, you mentioned second announcer, which I still don't know why, what first versus second does. So give us kind of the lay of the land
Okay.
in that regard.
Okay, so your smaller shows, sometimes they only have one announcer because they're a quieter show. And so one day is the dressage, and then you move to the show jumping, and then you do the cross country. But shows have gotten so large that all three phases are going on at the same time. So usually there's the first person, and they sort of get the better jobs, and then the second person, and then the third person. Um, So as an announcer, what you're trying to do is you're talking to the public over the public address system, and you are telling them everything that's going on, and you're telling them that that mother and father who are sitting listening to the speakers, and they're thrilled that you have sponsors. They want to know that their kid just negotiated the coffin question and they did it well and they're clear, or the coach is there and they're listening to somebody doing their first prelim, and they're listening and they're clear here and they've moved over here, and okay, they've turned left and they've jumped over that. That's what they're listening. So you're trying to explain that to them as well as get your sponsors in. Whereas a commentator is sitting in a booth, but they're not responsible for anything out there. They're commentating. And so they have the time, if they see a particular ride or particular person that's gone out like Boyd or somebody like that, to delve into it. Whereas I'm going, okay, on the course now is Boyd Martin. He's number one in the world, and he was in these Olympics and that Olympics. But now this kid that's riding against him, her parents want to know that she's coming home safe. So you're doing all those things. So those are the two differences.
Got it. And as an announcer, are you reacting to, other than what you can see in front of you, are you
Mhm.
reacting to what you're hearing on the radio, or do you have screens as
Yes.
well?
No, we don't have screens unless you're at something like Defender, unfortunately. So it's very much, people laugh at me, and I've got 5 radios in front of me, and you're listening to every jump judge because you've walked or you've golf carted the courses before. So you know they're turning left to the blue table with the pink flowers that's before the water. And so you're doing that from memory as the volunteer jump judge calls it in. And your good jump judges are very brief, but they're also saying, and they had a little scramble, but they're clear. And then once they come into my view, then I do play by play as they go around because that's much more interesting, obviously.
It's so fun to think about this role because there are few roles that somebody like that mean so much to people. Like you said, it's the parents waiting for you to say like clear at 7 or whatever it is. It's just like, thank God. Now tell me
Yeah.
about 8. People are
Yes.
really waiting with bated breath for what you're going to say next. And it's such an important role. I think back to my sister and I grew up riding in
Hmm.
Area 4, and Otter Creek Farms was one of the
Yes.
like big horse shows that we did. And I feel so bad I can't remember the announcer's name right now. I think it was Mark, but he was such a familiar voice
Hmm.
year after year and show after show, and it brought that event to life. It's like walking into your grandmother's house and like the scent of whatever she's baking brings it to life. This
Right.
person's voice
Hmm.
and announcing through the weekend really is such an integral part to what that experience is and what that memory is. And it's a special part of the show, both in terms of like you are doing something that is logistically very necessary and also something that adds so much to what the experience is.
Yeah, it's great, and because I'm old and I've done this so long, I've
You're
seen
old.
I've seen people, like Madeline Backus. I remember her when she was a little kid, and she had a black
Oh,
and white pony, and
cool.
she came to Rocking Horse every year from Colorado, and now seeing her grow up and be a professional on her own, and it's fun, and you remember that, and it's great to watch that as it happens. And that's one of the great things about shows that I do year after year is I see the people as they progress, or they've had a little problem and now you're back in the saddle, and oh, isn't that great?
Yes,
And
that
people I don't think realize that your TDs, your judges, the announcers, the control people, we're rooting for you as you're out there. We're not going, oh, I hope they have a horrible time out there.
yeah.
They are going, oh, put your leg on. Okay, you're clear. They are rooting for you to do well.
Yes. What a cool thing to keep in mind. Like next time anyone listening is at a show, remember that all these people want you to do great.
Yes.
They're here for you. Um, Tell us, as an announcer, this is I know you fill other roles too, and I'm excited to get into that. As an announcer, what are the more challenging parts of the job?
So, one of the challenging, sort of funny parts of the job is you're announcing, and it's either the person's out on cross country or they're in the middle of the award ceremony, and they hand you a piece of paper with this scrawl, and you're looking up and you're going, okay, and we're in sixth place, and you're trying to read this thing that, and it means something to this person, and you're like, I haven't the slightest idea what I don't know what this is,
Right.
but I'm going to muddle my way through it because we're happy to announce that it's somebody's first event, their last event, their whatever. But when it's scrawled on a piece of paper that you've handed me, and I'm trying to hold down pieces of paper, so that's a difficult, in a funny sort of way. That's a difficult thing. We're happy
Yes.
to announce it. Get it to us early.
Yeah,
um,
right, clearly. Maybe I
yes,
mean the between the horse names and the rider names, pronunciation would be a very challenging part for me.
it is. And so what you cheat on is you say it fast with an accent if you can't figure it out. And so you do that whether you're doing, I also announce pure dressage. So you also do that. It's fast with an accent if you don't know. There are some announcers um, that speak many languages. I do not happen to be one of them. I learned French for the 2010 World Games in Kentucky because I announced the Paralympians. And French was I didn't know nobody else was going to speak French, and so I took lessons and learned it, and then people came up and
Wow.
talked to me in French, and I didn't know what they were saying.
That means you did a pretty spectacular job though that they assumed
Apparently,
that you
because they
can.
they came up and they were really grateful that at least I had tried. So,
Yeah.
but we're going to go back on topic now to the hardest thing.
Mhm.
You know things, and there's a saying: the price you pay for knowing is knowing. So in some contexts, it's that a particular person isn't as nice as they are on social media, but when they're out there now, when you're announcing and you're like, and Susie Q is clear and she's da da da. And then the worst thing is, of course, unfortunately, because of I've been doing this a long time, I have been there for horse death, rider death, and it is an unfortunate part of our sport. And you balance information. People don't need to know all things, but you also have to keep that show going as you know what's happening over there to the side with the screens are up, but you're trying to keep, okay, we're on a hold. It's going to be about 44 minutes. And then you're talking to somebody on the radio or on a phone about something quite private.
Mhm.
And we want to thank our sponsors and this. And so um, that is probably the most difficult part is doing that compartmentalization where you're sounding like, yeah, we're on hold and it'll be a little while longer, while over here it's a thing.
Yes. That sounds incredibly hard to be thrown into a tragedy at the same moment that everyone
Yes,
else is and have to navigate it in a way that is appropriate to the role that you are filling.
right.
Tell me how, like, is there training that's done ahead of time to prepare you for a situation like that? And what, like, if there is something on course happening, whether it's the worst of the worst or just, kind of a middle of the spectrum thing that
Mhm.
isn't meant to be announced the entire show,
Right.
what has your training told you to do in those situations?
So, what people may not know is that at the beginning of an event, no matter if it's an event with 50 people or 650 people, you have what's called a safety meeting, and your main people are going to come in, your main medic, your safety officer, your vet, your TDs, the person driving the horse ambulance, your show organizer, and we have a meeting and away from everybody else, and we talk about. There's actually a protocol that you follow. USEA, USEF has specific things that we need to know. Do you have a person to talk to the family? If this particular thing happens, do we have a place to land a helicopter, or is it actually faster for ground transportation to do these sort of things? If there happens to be a serious injury of a horse, where does that horse get taken? Which trailer takes it? And I forgot to mention the very important course guys, because they are usually the first guys on the scene, and they're helping with the fence and the horse and all the things. So you actually have a meeting before everything starts, and everybody knows their role. Um, but it was not difficult for me in the beginning because, again, I was a police officer and I've seen all sorts of awful things. And I'm very good at uh, compartmentalizing that. Um, I have had other people who have sat with me who have enjoyed announcing or enjoyed it until there was a thing.
Right.
And so, I I now have 6 people that I can send places that I've taught to do this strange job. Um, but you do some scenarios and you do some, hey, this may happen, and this is what you do. And hopefully, the first time it happens, I'm sitting there with them and I can
Mhm.
walk them through it.
And you maintain your role as the person who basically keeps people up to date on what is happening, and in those cases, without kind of jumping the gun. When you don't have enough
Yeah,
information, just giving them enough information so that.
right. You say, for example, John Smith has parted ways with his horse at fence 5.
Got it.
90% of the time, and then 2 seconds later, you go, riders up, horses up, fence is
Mhm.
clear, we're going to keep rolling. Um, or you say, and we're going to have a hold on the course for a little bit
Got it.
and try not to have dead air.
Mhm. And just to lighten things up a little bit,
Good.
whenever there's dead air, do you have some go-tos in terms of how you're filling that space? Of
Oh,
course,
yeah.
throw to the sponsors, but what are some other kind of tricks of the trade that you've learned from doing this as long as you've been doing it?
Um, you start, it sounds very random, but you start talking about, and show jumping's going up in bloody bloody field and da 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 da, and upcoming is this, and by the way, we're on hold, we've been on hold for this long, we think we're going to clear in this time, so those of you that are in warm up can all hang out,
Mhm.
or those of you in warm up, we're going to get restarted in 5 minutes, so let's go ahead and let people start warming up, because you don't want them warming up for 500 years out there, and because it's hot
Yes.
usually.
Yes.
And then you talk about, like, one of my go-tos is the sport of eventing comes from the cavalry, and this is why we do dressage, and which now a lot of people don't know, and they don't, and because I've done all these things in, with 42 people going sideways and stuff, I can sort of fall back on that. And then the cross
Yes.
country was the scouts going, and you had to jump people's fences because you were heading through their backyards to go, so you sort of go to that.
I love it. A true professional. Um, let's talk about the role of cross country control. Another another thing that I have to admit I was I'm not familiar with. So
Right.
why is it that I've heard 1,000 times about the technical delegate, but I don't have any idea what the role of a cross country control person does?
Probably one of the reasons is that there's no test to be a controller. We all fall into it by odd circumstances, and we are not technically an official. So, as I said, we sort of fall into it, but it is actually, if I had to choose between the two, I actually like controlling better. And
Wow.
it's that micromanaging because you want to make sure things in a crisis get handled right. So your controller is sitting there, and the controller is supposed to know everything that's going on. He or she knows that the horse starting out had not a good round in the show jumping, and so we're watching that one. And they know that the horse that's coming to fence 25 is sort of dragging, so we're keeping an eye on there. And they know where the medics are, and they know where this is and that is. And so literally in control of sending whatever help needs to be when there's a thing to be sent, and keeping track of, for example, the new modified rule, where modified now follows with the prelim rules, that you get 3 stops on course, and on that fourth one you're out, which, or on the third one you're out, which a lot of people don't realize in modified, and they are very surprised when they're taken off the course because they're
Yeah.
used to training in below where it's 4. So you're keeping track, because I can assure you no rider at the water ever thinks they step back. And so all of a sudden they're eliminated and they're like, I didn't go anywhere. Well, your horse stepped back, it went forward. And so you're
Yep.
keeping track of all of that. And
So tell me, it sounds to me, this control role sounds like you're, I mean, kind of like a circus director. Like you're wearing
you are.
so many hats and kind of serving different aspects of the
Hmm.
show. If you had to distill it down to like the most basic form,
Hmm.
is the control person kind of like a right-hand man or woman to the TD, or is the control
Yes.
person falling kind of in the media side of things, similar to an announcer?
No, you're much more on the official side, because the poor TD is also having to think about other things. And so they are very reactive. They're waiting for you to say to them, hey, there's a problem over there, because they're also listening to somebody in their ear that's, standing next to them talking. So what the control person is doing is getting all the information, sort of like a spider getting all this information from everywhere.
From the radios.
Yes, from the wonderful volunteers on the radio. And you're responsible for everything, such as, hey, that rider over there is starting to look a little funny. They're calling it in, and they're starting to look a little, so the TD will move or send somebody over to that area. Or, hey, all of a sudden the clock stopped at the start box, and, we need a TD over there. So the poor TD's running around here, and we're sort of like the administrative assistant keeping them going everywhere.
Got it. Okay, so you're kind of taking in more information than the TD can take in at a given time, but sending the important stuff the TD's
Right.
direction. Is there more than one control person at a show?
Not usually, because um, I know, there have been people in the past that have used people for one side of the course and the other side of the course. The problem is that they never quite communicate correctly. And it's much easier for me, because a good course designer, your horses come out in a rhythmical pattern. So after you've done about 4 horses, when the person starts out, the other horse is at fence 7, and this horse is going to be at fence 17. And as long as everybody's at the same place, you know that this rider's too slow and this rider's too fast, or everybody's going at the same pace. And you don't listen to fence numbers as much once you get started. That's his voice, that's her voice, that's the kid's voice over there, and you know where the horses are and stuff. So they get into a rhythm. And so you can tell, oh, this one's only here, but this one's already over here. We're going to
Yeah.
have a problem.
So is the role, I know the role of announcer is a paid position and can take you into a career like you have done with your career. Is
Hmm.
the position of cross country control a volunteer position? And sounds
It
like you
is
need to know a lot
not.
about the rules.
Yeah, yeah, I'm like the rules queen usually, because you have to remember, okay, the rule changed January 1st, for example. I live in Florida, so technically December 1st is the start of the new eventing year, which people forget because nobody reads the rule book in December.
Yeah.
So you keep up on the rules. You go over with the TD. Okay, is there anything I've forgotten? New rule as far as stops, as far as qualifications, as far as any of this stuff. So um, you tend to become the rule person because the TD is doing 75 other things. And so you do, if you've worked long enough, um, you'll say, yes, that's correct. That rule is blah de blah, or in warm up, and the TD can't quite get there. If you know, you don't say anything if you don't know. But yes, that particular
Yeah.
piece is no longer accepted, or it is accepted.
Hmm. Interesting. And this, did you mention if it's a paid position?
It is.
Okay.
Uh, I've only known one controller in my life that has been sued. And it was a case from California years and years ago. I carry insurance for that reason.
Wow. I mean,
Um,
naturally, but something I never would have thought of.
well, you wouldn't. Well, hopefully.
Yeah. Um, and is the TD, as far as like getting into this role as a cross country control person, if this is piquing anyone's interest, tell us how someone would get into that role, and is it competitive, or does the role need more people to have interest so that we are kind of filling a pipeline?
We always need more people. As I said, I'm 60, and the youngest person that I know that does control on a semi regular basis is 40. And like I said, I now have 6 people that I can pretty much send, places and stuff. And what I say to people all the time is, come sit with me. Come and sit. The only basic rule is you never can talk about what happens in there because there's private conversations that go on about this, that, and the other thing. Come sit, see if it's something that you would like to do. I am the only woman that I know of that does this professionally on a full-time basis, announcing and control. Um, there's probably only 4 or 5 of us in the United States now, and the others are men who do it professionally like I do.
Wow, that's just not enough people.
It is not enough people, and as I said, and I'm close to one of the youngest,
Hmm.
um, and we need more people. Um, Control, if you like it, is a tremendous amount of fun when things are
Yeah.
going well and everything, and it's a tremendous amount of fun, and knowing that things get done right if there's a problem.
Yes, it
Announcing is
sounds.
fun.
Yes. And you are both a control person and an announcer, but you can only hold one role per event, correct?
Only in FEI. When I do normal USEA events, I actually prefer to do both because it's easier for me. My brain works better if I'm doing both things at the same time. If I'm just controlling, my mind starts to wander a little bit, and the same with announcing because I'm so used to doing both. So, um, our Florida events, as you know, we have a lot of large events in Florida. I've done the ACs many times where we've had 1,000 competitors. And then we have several announcers because not one person can possibly do all of those things. But it is both of those are paid positions. Um, the announcing is much easier to break into because the announcer is not responsible for getting the ambulance to that person if there's a problem.
That is fascinating that you can do both at once. So, describe to me what, like on cross country day, if you're filling the role as an announcer and controller simultaneously,
Mhm.
I mean, how? It seems like you're on the mic the whole time announcing. How are
You
you also listening and relaying?
Well, I work with what's called a foot pedal, so I have 2 hands free, and I have a pen in this hand, and I have a radio in this hand all the time. And so what you do in the morning, the day before or the day before that, you've gone and you've walked all the cross country courses or you've golf carted. So you know that fence 21 is a massive blue table and it's frangible and blah, blah, blah. So you go to the jump judge briefing in the morning and you brief your jump judges and you thank them extremely for being there. And you brief them about what you need on the radio and how this radio works because some people have never even touched one before and it's frightening to them. And so you tell them how to use the radio, and then I leave before the technical delegate does their thing because I have to get out and start the generator or set up the mics and get all my stuff in order. So you go out and you kick in your sound and you check your sound, and then your jump judges start coming out and you check in with them on the radio and you check in with the course guys and the medical and everybody on the radio. And then once it starts, you pretty much go for the length of that day. And again, it requires a lot of concentration, but I like things like that. So
Yes, you are an incredible multitasker, is what I'm gathering. Cool under pressure and unbelievable multitasker. As the control person, are you the point person for the jump judges or the course guys
yes,
and the medics?
yes,
Okay,
and yes. So what they say is everything runs through control. So
got
you
it.
hear that there's a fall, for example. Okay, and in my briefing, I have said, okay, if you have a fall of a horse or a horse and rider or a rider, if you're taking your radio with you and you're not screaming at me and you're running up and you're checking on them, and what I'm going to do, it's always the same three questions: how's the rider, how's the horse, and how is the fence? And everybody in the radio obviously is listening. So how's the rider? Rider is fine, give me a minute, because they're not really sure. Or I need medical. I need medical covers everything. We don't discuss what I know by their voices. So medical is starting out. How's the horse? Horse is caught. Horse is running back to the barn. I need the vet. And then how is the fence, which sounds very odd. What we're asking is, did the nice person fall off over there and they're all okay? So the oncoming horse and rider have a clear path. The fence is clear. If everything's happening in front of there, the fence is not clear. Or I need course repair because of frangible or something has happened. And when I'm giving the briefing, what I tell people is, it's okay for that fence to not be clear, but I'm going to keep hounding you because there's horses coming every 2 minutes. And one time in my life, I have had somebody jump over a person laying in front of a fence, and it was terrifying for everybody. And I never want to have that experience
Oh
again.
my God.
So
Wild.
you get a little, and I tell people in the beginning, you get a little stressed. Is the course clear? Is the course clear? And I worked a show last weekend, for example, where we actually had to hold two horses at the same place, which you try never to do, because the fence judge didn't answer and didn't answer. And then it was, oh my God, I got to hold over. Okay, we're holding over here. So we get a little bit like, let me know here.
Yes, that makes sense. And just a moment of appreciation for all of the volunteers, all of the people in positions like yours that can make it happen. Because if you haven't experienced being a volunteer and hearing the radios and understanding how those split second crucial decisions have to be made and how it takes multiple people to make them, man, it comes together so seamlessly at so many of these shows, but it is a lot happening in the background.
It is. And we have volunteers because I go all over the country and I see the same people year after year. And they are super good at their job. We have a husband and wife in Florida, for example, that literally can judge 4 or 5 fences and write down everything and stop the horse if they need to. And I mean,
Wow.
and they're so worth their weight in gold. And and we have other people that try it, and it's not that, which is okay. I have had one person in my life leave in the middle,
Oh my gosh.
and they were a stopping point. And so I'm like calling this person who had been there and stop, and I'm not getting an answer, and send somebody out because radios die and things happen. She'd left. She'd gone home.
Oh
She
my
wasn't having a
gosh.
good day, and she just left everything and went home. It was like,
Wow.
huh, look at that.
Wow. Yeah, the things that I mean, having done this for a long time, those are things that I just, a lot of people probably haven't seen happen, but
Yeah.
you have to make the show must go on.
And
Um,
and it does.
so to tie a bow on how people might dip their toe into these roles as a control person, announcer, or both. Tell me the personality traits that make up a great control person and or announcer, so somebody listening can be like, that actually does sound like me. And I know you mentioned they could come sit with you or maybe reach out to you if they're not in Florida,
Right.
but what are some other kind of first steps that they could take if they're interested?
So again, most of us are fairly friendly. Not all of us, but most of us are fairly friendly. They can contact their organizer um, and ask, "Gee, I'd like to learn to do this. Would that be something that so and so?" And I have people contact me, organizers and stuff. So and so would really like to learn it. And we say, "Come on." There are some people that are not comfortable being a mentor, and that's okay. Um, so the best way is to, if you don't know me or you don't know somebody who knows me, again, contact your organizer or your volunteer coordinator, of course, and then for an announcer, you have to be as excited on Sunday night at the ACs when you are literally announcing the 1,000th competitor and it's 9 o'clock at night. You have to be just as excited for that person as you were the first person on course. And that's one of the things. Everybody's equal out there. And I'm really cognizant because a lot of times live streams are going to be much more focused on the name riders because that's what people are tuning in. But I try to be very cognizant again of the rider that I was. I don't have anybody there with me, and yet my people want to know about me. And again, it's just as important for somebody going starter at their first starter. They get the same amount of time as somebody who's been in the Olympics 7 times and is doing blah blah blah. So enthusiasm about it. If you're looking to control, the number one thing is you're calm in you're calm in crisis, or you know how to stop talking for a second in crisis. And then it's somebody who again is nosy, likes to know what's going on everywhere. And so seriously, I'm terribly nosy, and I like
I
knowing
love
things
that.
about people and why they did this or why they didn't do that.
I love that part of it because you really do get to be in the behind the scenes,
Yeah,
in the know. Um, that's so awesome. So I that took me off my train of thought because I was just like, I think I want to be a control person.
good.
You be nosy. Um, okay, so you have mentioned a few things that make you really exceptional at what you do. And, one of them is knowing how to fill dead air, being a multitasker, and being calm in crisis. Are there other things that you've picked up over the years that kind of take like that have helped you evolve in the role, especially as announcer? Like what what are some things that you're doing that make it special and kind of you've learned?
Well, not so much now, but in the beginning, I would um, call ahead if I was going somewhere, or I would say, "Gee, I would like to come up and like Brian O'Connor, who for years and years and years was the control person in Kentucky." And I said, "Can I come sit with you and just watch and learn?" Because I wanted to learn how how different people did it and what made it, for them and their particular things, because we can learn from everybody. Um, so and it's scary to reach out to it's really scary to reach out to people and say, "Gee, could I come sit and listen to you?" Again, I also announced dressage, and I would say, when I first started going down to Wellington, for example, as the not important person over there, I would go sit. "Gee, can I come sit with you while you announce these people from all over the world? And how do you do it? And what computer program do you use for freestyles? And um, what happens when this happens? What do I do when this happens?" And some of it you learn badly or successfully when the power goes out or the lights go out during a freestyle, or so,
Oh
and
my
you
gosh.
you you learn. Um, sometimes you don't do the correct thing when these things happen, but you learn by doing it.
Yes. That's so interesting. I mean, it kind of reminds me of so many riders are watching people they respect either in
Hmm.
person or on YouTube, seeing how they execute the ride and
Right.
seeing people in this role execute their role makes perfect sense that that will kind of help you get reps without doing it yourself all the time.
Right. And also because I was a volunteer for so many years before, I can scribe, I can do in-gate. I love jump judging. I don't get to do it very much anymore. I love to jump judge. Um, so you are sympathetic to that person or empathetic to that person when or to the judge, and I am not a judge, thank God. Um, that the judge is in the booth and they're ready to go and their scribe doesn't show up. And I can do that. They can go without an announcer for 3 minutes while we find a scribe. I can go help you with that.
Yes. How cool. That makes a lot of sense. You've been in the shoes before, so you can either fill in but or you just know what their experience is and
Right.
what they're being asked to do because you've done it yourself.
Yeah.
Um you've kind of hinted at just these wild things that have happened at shows when you've been there in any of these roles. Can you recount any particularly funny stories that have happened? I
Sure.
mean, I'm sure you just have so many, but do any like memorable funny
Sure.
stories come to mind in eventing or dressage?
Um, so one of the things in eventing, I was out in California, um, and I was announcing, and you always tell the jump judge and everything, be mindful of the dogs, usually the dogs off the leash. But one time I was in California, and these very nice horse people were letting their toddler run around. I had to call medics because the horse had run into the toddler in the water jump.
Oh my god.
And it never, first of all, it never occurred to me that you would let your child, if you were a rider, play in the water jump when there was a horse coming. And the poor medics were like, yes, there's a toddler that needs you to go look at them because they were playing in the water jump. So you can't
The
make it
to-
up.
the
Yeah.
toddler was okay.
The toddler was perfectly fine. The parents were perfectly chastised and embarrassed.
Yep.
Um,
Learning
um,
experience.
yeah. Electronics are always fun. We keep trying to go to a lot of wireless things. My experience with a lot of wireless things is they're great until they're not. Um, I was doing AECs, which used to be up in Area 4. We did it at Lamplight for many years. And on cross country, one of the guys that worked with sound said, I fixed our problem from last year, and we're going to have all of these wireless amplifiers. So I'm going to set it all up, and we go out and we test it the day before, and everything's working great. And there was a model airplane club next to Lamplight. And they, on Saturdays, go, and all of a sudden, the only place that I can get wireless is sitting behind a bush. So I
Oh,
announced for 3 days, sitting behind I saw no one.
oh my
I
god.
sat behind a bush on the ground and announced and controlled because that was the only place that I could hear all the radios
Wow.
and that the microphone would transmit to all of those things. So very glamorous.
So glamorous. That
So
is
glamorous.
it's just fun to hear how people respond to challenges though, because I think that's another thing that probably makes you great at what you do is getting creative and making it work, because I think a lot of people might throw their hands up and be like, it's not working, there's nothing we can do
Right.
here. You're like, I have service behind this bush, so I'll be here
This is
until
where I'm going
further
to sit.
notice.
Yeah.
That's pretty wild.
Yeah. And I guess the, from a pure dressage one, last year I was out in California doing what we call a CDI, which is an FEI event for dressage. And I had not been to this particular place before, and they had sound guys. And sound guys make me anxious because they're used to it and they don't always show up right at the beginning. And I'm so paranoid, I'm there an hour ahead of time. And I had
Yep.
mentioned a couple times to these very nice sound guys, there's a puddle forming over there, and you've dug a trench, and it is making me very anxious because it's actually raining in California and you've spliced wire there. Um, and of course, I had literally got told, and was 59, you just sit there and look pretty
Oh
and
boy.
we'll take care of it. And of course, it had to go out during something, and everybody's looking at you, and you're like, and here I am.
Yeah. And you're like, if only I had predicted this.
Yes. Um, and it doesn't happen a lot anymore. But when I started, I was the only woman really in my profession trying to do it full time, and things were built at that time for men. I was always having to sit on books
Yeah,
because countertops were made for men, which is why I stand usually when I announce. And things were up high for men. And when you're rolling up wire, men's arms are longer than mine
mhm.
are. And you would get the occasional person, I don't get them much more. Well, do you know how to do this? Or do you know how to work the equipment? Yeah, I do. Well, so and so, he always announces me. Sorry, he's not here this time. I don't know what to tell you. I get a lot less of it now, but every once in a while you'll get somebody. Usually it's an older person. I prefer a man's voice. I'm really sorry. I can
Yeah.
change a lot of things. I can't change that. And you just
Ladies,
laugh.
this is your call to get in the game. It is
Yeah.
pretty astounding that you are the only female doing
But
this
it's
profession in the
hard
country.
on it's hard on your I don't compete anymore because you
Mhm.
it's almost impossible. It's hard on your
Yeah.
family life
Yep.
because you're gone so much, and when I come home on Sunday evening, Monday morning, I don't want to talk to anybody all day.
I
Uh,
bet.
and um, I am no longer married. When I was married, I had a very understanding husband. But even so, oh, your wife's gone. It sounds great. 35 weeks a year. But in reality, you're gone 35 weekends a year. And that's
Yes.
hard on normal life, family life. I have my own family friends around me trained now. They sort of know the things, but to me, the benefits, the travel, the people I meet, they outweigh everything. But it is hard.
Yeah, definitely something to factor in if this is a role that someone's considering. And I think a lot of people want to make a career in equestrian sports because
Hmm.
that's where their heart is. But
Yes,
yes, it's definitely something to consider, especially if, like you said, they have a family or they have a horse of their own. That's a
right. That
lot of
they're
away time.
yes, and in the beginning, you take every job you can get, and they put you up. Sometimes they put you up in people's houses, which is odd.
Yes,
I'm old now. I don't have to share rooms anymore,
good.
and so forth and so on. But oh, you're sharing a room with this person that you've never met before. And in the beginning, you take the jobs that, not that the people aren't nice, but maybe you're announcing out of a trailer where in the corner they've piled all this furniture and there's rats in there because you can hear them and you're just going, and here I am.
Yep.
And but I would recommend it to everybody to try it. It's a
Mhm.
lot of fun. Uh, Again, ask to come sit with us. I am thrilled. Anytime I can throw somebody on a microphone, I'm thrilled.
That's so cool. That's really fun. And so nice of you too to be helping people get exposed to it and give it a shot and see if it might be a good fit for them. We got a couple of questions ahead of time that I've been saving for the end because I'm interested in both of them. They're more high level questions just
Okay.
based on what you've seen over the years. And
Hmm.
the first one is, how has eventing competition evolved in your eyes? What are some of the maybe less obvious ways that you've seen the sport evolve, and are you pleased with the evolution?
So I think we could talk two things. The first thing we could talk about is safety, and the second thing we could talk about is money. I'm going to talk about money first because I don't come from money. And when I started eventing, before I started doing all of this stuff, most of the people that I knew, they had a horse or they had horses, and there were wealthy people. But now I'm seeing that trickle down where people who are just starting out in eventing at the starter level, at the beginner novice level, and they want perfect footing. Have you aerated the cross country course? And when I started out, when I was new to eventing, I rode on what they told me to. Um, it never occurred to me for that. And there's a lot of, I don't know if it's pressure or whatever, more so at the teenage level, the young adult level, to have your so and so boots and your white this. And oh, if you don't go to a trainer, and I'm going to use Leslie Law because I think he's a fabulous trainer. Okay. If you don't train, well, I train with this one. Well, Susie would like to train with that, but they can't afford it. Um, so watching the money come along, and in good ways, because sponsors are very important. And that's something that I could never do. I could never gather sponsors and vendors and make them all happy, because I couldn't do that. But the money aspect, and you have to remember, for every Olympic rider out there that has sponsors, that horse can go away at any time because that sponsor could find a new and shiny rider. And after you've done your cross country and you've done everything else and you're a sponsored rider with this money, you have to go sit with the owners when you're tired and you're sad, or you'd really like to just go to bed. Um, and we all complain about entry fees, but we all want the best. You don't want the small R judge, you want the S judge. And you want a great microphone system, and you want pretty shiny awards. And yet it all has to get paid for, and the organizer has to pay this stuff before the show starts. And if they cancel, they still have to pay for all this stuff. So the money thing, I think a lot of people don't realize both sides, that eventing is starting to be a very elite sport, not at the schooling shows, but at the recognized level. So I think that is one of the ways. And the safety thing, um, you know, when I started competing, we didn't wear vests. I mean, and when vests came out, I can remember wearing my first vest and thinking, I will never get used to this thing bumping
Right.
me in the neck.
Yeah.
Uh, um, but the rise of the frangible fences, because I was announcing and controlling in those years before they became popular, in those years in the late 2000s. And I was there at those shows and saw people flip over fences that, take the, which, but it was not the course designer's fault. It was not anybody's fault,
Yeah.
but safety has come, and the frangible pins, which we all complain about because then you have to stop the course because they have to fix the fence. But it has come a long way, and I am all for it. And in the old days, even up until last year, you could fall off your horse and get back on and go. That wasn't really very smart of us. And I will say, I hold the record in schooling. When I went to work to circle this around at Jim Graham's farm, I fell off 7 times my first time jumping into the water in a row
Oh my
in
gosh.
January, because I was afraid to tell them I had never jumped over anything into water. And I was on a perfectly experienced horse, and we went up the hill and down the hill and over the culvert and into the water, and there I went, because I was
Onto the
afraid to
ground.
tell people. So I do still hold the record for 7 times falling off in the water. I
And
would
getting
never
back
let
on.
somebody do that today.
Right. Yes. Good. Well, I'm happy to hear that side of the evolution. Um, and yes, would much rather see a fence come down and a hold on
Yes.
course to put it back up than a horse
Yeah.
somersault over it.
Yeah.
Um, my last question is about community. And it
Mhm.
kind of goes back to talking about how the announcer just is such an integral part of the experience. How how have you seen community be built within eventing, and is there a place for, I mean, this is really the question. Is there a place for the announcer to be fostering community, or is it showing up and doing your job that kind of helps facilitate that happening at the shows?
In my perfect world, everybody is welcome. And in my perfect world, because I've been that person that went to the show and I didn't know anybody because I'd been sent there and nobody talked to me. And again, like I said, starting out, Gretchen Butts. Wayne Quarles was one of the first people that was really nice to me and explained how all this stuff worked when I didn't know. Rick
Yeah.
Dunkerton from Event Entries
Oh yeah.
I'd be going, I got called to go to this show and I don't know anybody, and not only who to talk to, and they would say, okay, go to this person if you have a problem, but when you go to the airport, you want to take this route and not that route, and that sort of thing. And I try. I'm not great at it because you wouldn't know this, but I am absolutely horribly shy with people when I meet them, and I can talk to 5,000 people on a microphone.
Wow.
But if I walk into a room of people, it's awful for me.
Yeah.
And so, but I try very hard. People come up to your announcing booth all the time and try to make them, hey, how are you doing today? Um, because we want people involved in our sport.
Yeah.
And again, that mom that's standing there next to you or that dad, they're not doing it to annoy you. They're doing it because they can hear that radio and they want to know that their kid is safe out there.
Mhm.
And so even when you're thinking, oh, you want to let them know that things are happening and that things are happening well. So
Mhm.
I try. I'm not great at it with strangers, but I try.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. And it is it does just speak to how it is all connected and it all works
Yeah.
together to make for a special experience. And I think we can all think of the shows that it comes to life in the best way that really does create a community and remind us that we're all here for the same reason. We
We
love doing it.
we are. And as you get to know people, good shows have teams, and these people work together for years upon years so that if there's a problem, you always can depend on somebody.
Yes.
Your good shows that continue to have good people, good judges, and everybody else, and you've worked, and in crisis, you don't even, that person's going to do their job, and that things are going to be okay because them. And luckily, again, because I'm old and I'm doing this a long time, like when I go to Kentucky, I have friends in Kentucky now, not just work friends, but friends in Kentucky that I can go hang out with, and friends in, excuse me, other places, and friends out in Montana and stuff. So that's the best part.
Yes, that is so cool. Well, this has been such a treat, Cyndi. You truly did pull back the curtain on not only announcing, not only being a cross country control person, but kind of everything happening in the background so that the shows can happen and the shows can go off without a hitch or with minimal hitches. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but we are very grateful to you and we're grateful to everybody who makes these shows happen. So if you're somebody who's volunteering or if you're somebody who's also announcing or jump judging or controlling, um, thank you from all of us for helping make
Yes.
these shows happen. And thank you, Cyndi, for being here with us tonight and for everything that you're doing for the sport. It's so appreciated.
I appreciate you having me on here. This has been fun. I was terrified, but it's been fun.
Good. I'm so glad. And if anybody hears Cyndi's voice over the loudspeakers at events coming up, give her a wave or a thank you. Um, because now you know a little more about the person behind the voice.
Thank you
So,
so
Cyndi,
much.
yes, thank you. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.